So everybody I know now in computer science is an AI researcher. It doesn't matter what they do. So it's a great word to use, and everybody loves it. But the real holy grail, I think, in artificial intelligence is actually education. This idea that we can create an artificial mentor that doesn't just, it's not just like a Siri that helps you order pizza or make an appointment with a hairdresser, with a stylist, but actually some kind of companion that helps you navigate the world and can actually help you learn quicker or learn stuff that is more interesting. So that's a big vision in AI, and it's very hard to crack, and it's the billion-dollar business if you can crack it, if you can actually create a companion, a digital companion. But that's not so much specifically part of this talk, but it all connects, because I ultimately think that all these social media things will lead to some kind of digital companion. That's kind of the goal of all of this. But again, it's a very wide topic, so this presentation is very wide, so just keep an open mind and just ask whatever you want to ask, and we'll discuss whatever you want to discuss. So these are a bit of questions around this, and I'm focusing on social media or social networks because that's the big topic. That's what everybody is always talking about. It's not so much about how do governments store my telephone data or something. I mean, that's all part of the story. It's all part of me. It's all mine and somehow created. But this is specifically about this phenomenon known as social networks or social media, which has become so powerful and so quick as well, and so disruptive for a lot of this stuff that we're doing. And the generations are dealing with it differently, which we also saw in the Bigfoot project. So my background is very much in computer science. I founded or basically initiated this Bigfoot initiative, which now it's an app on the app stores, but we can't use it anymore because Facebook shut down the APIs. So after Boston, so we can't access the data, even if the user gives consent that the app starts analyzing your data, it still won't work. So last 3 months we've gone dark. You can still go to the website, you can download the app, but we have to figure out how we can work with Facebook better as a research institute. They're freaked out. As soon as you just mention the word, we want to analyze data, they just shut down everything because they're just too worried that mess that could come back. Yeah, that's the main thing here. Just to give you some context, some history on where this all comes from, and I won't give you too much. Do you know this guy, Tim Berners-Lee? Yeah, so he invented the web, not the internet. The internet is just connecting computers, but the web, the idea of connecting documents. And why I'm mentioning him, you'll see in the next slide, which is important. He basically was just sitting in a basement in Zurich, in Zern, or wherever in Switzerland, where the particle collider is, and he just found it really important to share all his research findings via email. He said, oh, screw this is really tedious, so let's find a better way. So he posted this information on a public, like a site on his computer with an IP address, so using the internet so that someone can access the information. But the genius thing is that he came up with a very simple way of connecting documents, which is the hyperlink. So the idea of the hyperlink, which we take for granted, is actually a very interesting concept, because you can freely link documents that are distributed freely all over the web. Not in one central point, but just like freely all over the place. And which sparked this revolution, which he couldn't even imagine ever would happen. It was just out of convenience he did it. But there is this explosion of information, and these are all computer nodes, but this is a 2005 representation of the web, how everything is connected. But we're starting to see these super nodes appear, like these accumulations of nodes, which we call Facebook, or we call Instagram, or we call Twitter, or we call Google, and so forth. And they're changing the web because it's not free and distributed anymore. Everything is pointing inward. So it's like this lovely idea is imploding. But at the same time, just to give you again some context and motivate this, the information use of the internet is exploding. So we're having 3 billion users, everybody's on it, everybody's using it, and there's actually more, there was one here, yeah, there's more SIM cards than population on the planet. So it's kind of interesting. Some people have two phones, and it's just. But the question why I'm bringing this up, and this is from the and I can give you the slides. That's all no problem. These are from official sources. The question is, why are we so hungry? Why are we so keen on doing this? Which brings the question: why do we volunteer to give away all our information? Why do we have this paradox between what like, oh, we're really worried about our information, but at the same time, we just give it away. You know, it's like really weird. And it's like sometimes to me, it feels like someone who's like telling all his friends, I wouldn't drink any wine when watching television, and at the same time is putting the cork out and having a glass. You know, it's a real paradox. That's where this whole Bigfoot idea came from. It's almost like we're not true to ourselves in some way. So this thing is growing, it's exploding. The question is why? And it points a little bit to these things, like these, and we're coming closer to what the self is, or what the digital footprint is. And I'm deliberately doing this because I'm trying to change perception away from the Facebooks, the governments, the regulators. It's actually us who regulates it. So you're giving this away, and you're controlling it. It's not someone else. I mean, there's an educational question with how do we protect our kids. But funny enough, they're very good at this. They're much better at this than I am. Like they really know how to control information because they grew up with it. But there's still obviously elements of bullying and all these other things that we really have problems with. But for some reason, we like to do this stuff. We like to share information about ourselves. And there's a shift, and that's the really important shift. There's a shift, and that's often the really important part in this whole debate about your digital self and your footprint and your profile and all this. We're not sharing information anymore. We're not sharing documents anymore. We're sharing experiences. And that's a whole different shift because we're suddenly turning into these players. We're suddenly like projecting experiences to project something else that we maybe are. So our self becomes multiplied. And it's like you're on a stage. And if you can control that, like a very famous person in the US government at the moment, if you know how to control that, you can really become very successful in your career, as you can see with the TV show host being now president. It's an amazing phenomenon, and that's the key, the experience. And learning is an experience as well. That's why this is so important in the learning context, because you learn different if you use these tools. And I'm very positive about this. So I'm very positive about social media and privacy and data and all this kind of stuff. Also very positive about AI. It's just important that we shape it as a society, that we don't get large corporations just dominating it to make more profit. Which is also fine, but it has to be balanced. So, the important part, and again, just still motivating, and I'll bring you in a bit more, and hopefully you have like interesting questions or experiences yourself. The important part is how our experience is actually digitized. It's interesting to think, okay, you share a document via link or via email, or you throw an attachment in, or you have a class, and the class just shares documents on a server, on a shared Dropbox file or something like that. But sharing an experience is a whole different thing, and that's where this digital self comes in. Because sharing an experience is not just throwing up a photo and having some kind of selfie on a website, on a blog or something like that. Sharing an experience brings in this whole mess. I call it mess because nobody on this planet understands it yet, which is sharing, liking, commenting, reacting to, saying it's sad, it's not sad, checking how many views you have. That's where the experience comes in. That's where things become viral, or people become popular or not popular, and all this hard to manage stuff as well, all the bullying, all that stuff that goes out of control is part of the experience. And that's the new thing. And there's some academics that actually argue it's a new form of communication, because suddenly you have a digital asset, like a photo or a file, or just a text asset, like on Facebook, an update saying, I'm in McGinney's pub or something like that. And suddenly this other layer goes on top of it, which are the likes, the reactions, the comments, the shares, and this thing just flies out of the window and you don't know where it's going. You're just like, oh shit, like 200 people shared this. Do they see it, and do their friends see it, and how can I even control this beast, or what is actually going on? And that's where the confusion comes in, because the experience is new, and the experience is daunting as well in some way, but also very powerful if you know how to use it, which I won't be talking about now, but it's very, very important, and it's very powerful also in the educational setting, because you can multiply your efforts a lot quicker as well. But it's dangerous as well, because you get all these bullying and negative effects. So what's the difference between a digital experience or an interaction? Like these interactions, these engagements, these likes, these comments and all this kind of stuff, what's the real difference? In real life, it's spontaneous. That's why we like to talk with people, because it's a bit of an adventure. It's a bit of a risk, you know. You kind of go, I don't know what's going to come out of this, and you maybe have your hope or your emotions attached to it and all this kind of stuff. But as soon as it becomes online, it's orchestrated. And that's where this digital self becomes so important. And that's where all this data that's collected by companies is so important, because it represents a certain aspect of you. And somebody could think you're maybe a terrorist just because you Googled some stuff for your PhD that has nothing to do with you being a terrorist, but it seems like you orchestrated some side of yourself, but your motivation or intention is research. So that's where these dangerous things happen, where luckily we have GDPR and at least some kind of regulations around this, that you can't just be exploited completely. But that's a really important part. So the question is, when you think about profiles and think about digital self, you actually have to talk about what the self is. And that's a real philosophical question, almost spiritual question, but it becomes really important because what you are is very much what you represent in your physical space as a reputation through your friends, your families. You have different roles, different contexts. But now digitally it changes again. Like I have a LinkedIn profile for my research background, but I actually need 5 LinkedIn profiles because I also have a little poetry startup. I like to play guitar at the side, and I have a little band, and I have all these different faces, but I can't mush that all into one LinkedIn. So that's a really hard thing in terms of career, and career planning also hard as well. So obviously the question, who am I? And I kind of end now slowly with the big thing. It's just to motivate this, because it's just so interesting, you know, that we have this power now, and it's free for everyone. You don't even have to pay for it. I mean, you're paying with your data. All this, everybody says you're paying with your data, but it's fine to pay with your data if you know how to control it. Why not pay with your data? Why should I put it on the credit card and pay with it and do it otherwise? But again, I have a very radically positive view on this, so it depends on how you want to see it. But now, what are the problems, the societal problems that came out of this? And it'd be nice to hear a little more about how it relates to education. I'll discuss that. My master thesis was in edtech, so in e-learning, so I have that background. But I'm not like in the schools. The Bigfoot project is in the school. Like we did some trials in the schools to get some data. But it'd be interesting what problems you see. So these are still very high-level problems. Anybody ever read about this book or hear this term filter bubble? So it's a phenomenon, and I'm just going to basically just have 3 challenges, 3 high-level challenges that come out of social media into society and also into education. You really know what I'm talking about when I explain what it is. So this guy, he had a TED Talk a few years ago. You can look it up. It's a really interesting TED Talk. It was back at the election when it wasn't the Trump election, the one before in the US, where he's politically very active. And he has like a political blog, and he's very famous in America as a political activist for Democrats. So he's a Democrat. But he has a lot of Republican friends, and he's in Facebook, and he engages a lot more with his friends on the side of the Democratic Party. And then he suddenly sees that the opinions of the Republicans are disappearing in his stream. He's seeing less and less of that. So there's a bias, obviously, because it's a machine that's making this decision on scale for billions of users. There's no way a human can filter what to see and what not in this very narrow competitive space. So he noticed, oh, what's going on? And it means that this engagement, this experience that I'm talking about, that drives the algorithms that then filter and give you more information, because the algorithm that's driving most of these social media platforms is a so-called greedy algorithm. Greedy because it's optimized towards you viewing more. And because if you view more, you can sell more ads. Because obviously it's a company with shareholder value which wants to optimize their profit. So it's a very great story if you're a shareholder of these companies. But it means for you, and that's one of the problems that social media companies are facing now and don't know how to fix, is you lose the diversity in you and your profile, and that's the problem with the digital self, or your profile is very much one-sided. Because you're maybe interested in the Republican information, but you have no way of expressing it, because you won't like it, because like forces you to like it, obviously, as the word says. So you get this greedy algorithm, and it narrows, it creates a funnel or a bubble, and you see more of the same information. So that's one big problem. And again, maybe we can come back to these three problems. And the second one is an echo chamber. This happened specifically in the whole Clinton-Trump election, where a lot of the press gave us the clear idea that Clinton is going to win by 80% margin, 85% margin before. It turns out that a lot of the press work in the area of Boston, and it's a very liberal press, and they just bounced information off each other. So it's like a bigger echo chamber, it's like a bigger filter bubble, where everybody, groupthink is another one, where everybody just kind of, just more or less convinces each other what the opinion is, but forgets that the whole middle of America, in that case, wasn't really on social media that much and not that active. So again, there's a lot of learning here where we say, okay, this is difficult, and this is now really interesting because we have this Boston Analytica scandal. Did you hear about this scandal? I mean, do you know what happened there?
Was that the Cambridge Analytica?
Yeah, I keep crossing. I don't know why. It's just a thing in my head. I always call Boston Analytica. Maybe because I was in university. So,
Okay.
so Cambridge Analytica. Are you all aware what happened? What happened there?
Well, I don't actually know what happened. I know it was a scandal, but I'm not quite sure what actually happened.
Yeah. Well, the scandal is enough in this case, but it's basically part of this social experiment. I mean, obviously it was a data breach and all this information was used and was downloaded and so forth, but it was possible to test opinions in very, very small areas. And that's the dark side of all of this, which is the social engineering, where you can then start pushing ads. You can start pushing ads into a Facebook stream, and this ad then is fueled by clicks and likes, and also by fake accounts, where the Russians apparently came in. And because it's a greedy algorithm, because fake accounts start clicking on information that is targeted into a certain direction, which came out of this data that was analyzed, you can just bombard people with information, and after a while they'll start maybe believing some of it. So that's the problem with this greedy algorithm. Now Facebook switched that off, or changed it, which creates other problems because you can't just take it out of the system. Yeah, the last one obviously is fake news. That's a real problem as well. But all three problems, I would argue, are not problems of Facebook or the platform. They're problems of our own and our, let's say, laziness almost. Like if I see fake news, or if I see a news article, I can't just, and I see it online, I can't just blindly trust it because it's there. I have to spend time with it. I have to check where does it come from, or does it make sense, and therefore I'm very critical with like fake news. That's a problem with Facebook. Obviously, it's like watching telly in some way, but it just seems that a lot of the debate is focused in the wrong direction. It's actually partly our laziness as well, and that's important, I think, to say sometimes. And this is actually statistics from a U.S. Internet organization. It's a bit older. It's like almost 8 years old now, but it's like 50% of the people provide incorrect personal information online. Okay, that's fine. Why not? But obviously the question is, why would they do that? And what I'm trying to point at is a big overarching problem in this whole context. And you can see it here as well. Like this is a post Zuckerberg brought out just after the scandal. All the stuff he wants to do, and one is stronger detection. The most important thing is we do is improve the ability to classify misinformation. This means better technical systems to detect where people flag and so forth and so forth. And misinformation includes information that has a really negative impact also in educational settings, mismatching of facts, confronting clear ideas, all this mess. But how is that, the most important that we can do is classify information. So does anybody know how Facebook now does that? And I'm just talking about Facebook, it doesn't matter which social network, because Facebook is the obvious one. they have an army of freelancers that have 1.5 seconds per piece of content to identify if it could be fake or not. But nobody tells me what their bias is, what their political direction is, what their background is, nothing. Because a machine can't do that. So you have this massive, over 2 billion people in it machine that is fed on greedy algorithms that moves ahead, that gives us this great ability to share experiences. Like, I'm in contact with my mother all day, she's abroad. It's great, like, I love it. I don't want a world without those social media, without that power. But at the same time, I'm not quite sure how that ever can work in this context. Yeah.
I thought it was real people, but it's not an algorithm. There are actual people that have a quota of 1.5.
Yes, yes. There's no technical way to do this.
Where are they located?
There's a team in Bulgaria and a very big team in Ireland. I actually know 3 girls that work in the team.
Are they down at the headquarters?
Not in the headquarters, in the building, off-site.
And so they just read the streams and say...
Yes, they just go through, and different communities, different countries, different languages. So a lot of them are grouped in language pairs, depending on what they are. And it's a very daunting task because a lot of the imagery is very explicit, like stuff that like there's teams supporting them that they can actually delete what they saw during the day. But I mean,
so then their sole task is simply to filter out inaccurate news.
no, to market, not to filter it, to market. To say this could be potentially harmful or this could be potentially false. Like it's a marking. It's not. I mean, it's filtered out if it's very explicit, like if there's something on it that could be harmful or like on some way.
So it's not curated.
But it's.
It's not curated. It's just marked. It's just flagged.
Yes, yes. And there's different levels. I haven't seen the system or how it exactly works, but the challenge, a lot of this, and it's the wider debate is what actually is misinformation in that sense. And the problem in Facebook's case is the advertisement side, because you can upload an ad and then you can power that ad up with fake accounts and you can give it 1 million likes, and that makes it viral. And if it's fake, then you're really spreading fake news. I mean, if any of us just upload some fake information in any social media platform, I mean, you're going nowhere, to be honest. But if you throw some money behind it and you put it in as an ad, you can power it up very quick. But the big thing behind it I think it's trust. Like my research is very much shifted now into trust, or computational trust, which for me is the next frontier in all this AI stuff and machine learning. The question of trust is really the key. And I still feel that a lot of this stuff that's going on, as an adult, obviously for K-12 and kids and all that, there's a whole different debate. But as an adult, I feel responsible for the stuff I'm consuming. I don't think I can't just blame or pass this off to someone else. And at the same time, I can't just use social platforms where nobody is inside. I want to use big platforms with a lot of action in it, and a lot of money as well, that they can do cool stuff and cool research and give me great features. And it's just a paradox. I find it confusing for myself, working in computer science research. So there's 3 levels of trust, and again, I'm actually rambling on. I actually wanted to bring you in a bit more. But the typical first one in relation to misinformation, if you're in a pub, and it's actually the killer of any lovely pub conversations when people pop out their stupid phone and you're like, oh, so-and-so is coming for a gig, a surprise gig in Ireland, or such and such was in Ireland at such and such point. But you can say, oh, just Google it. So that's this trust in a platform, which makes very little sense because Google is an indexing system. So you're just clicking on the first link, which is a random page on the web, and you're holding it to your buddies and you're saying, okay, this is it. And even Wikipedia can be gamed. So just showing someone a Wikipedia page doesn't mean it's accurate or is like the standard either, because it's a crowdsourced application. There was a famous case, a master's student in the States a couple of years ago, just part of his research, he pushed for a jazz player. I don't know the name of the jazz player, but it's highly cited on the web. If you Google it, you'll find it. But he pushed into Wikipedia, he pushed this statement that this jazz player died. Okay, and he pushed it, and like a few days later, it actually came up on the page. But not just there, it came up in the press. And it went viral in the press, and the press suddenly, everybody was posting that this guy died, and it was printed. And he like, no, I'm not, I'm lying. But it's just to see that this trust part is, yeah, and it's just annoying because it's laziness. That doesn't need to be regulated. That has nothing to do with giving away of data or anything like that. It's all part of this.
One thing comes to mind for me, which was a terrible mistrust, was the BBC Planet. I don't know if anyone else saw this, but I had watched all those things with my kids, and one of them was about this tribe that built their houses up in the trees. And it looked ridiculous, like. But it was made by the BBC. We'd watched all the series, we'd seen all the elements, so we believed it. But it came out 6 months later or a year, and it was made from the BBC, a trusted organisation. So even in the non-social media things, you know, you can end up trusting something that you trusted before.
Yeah, but that's the for me hard. That's why I'm saying I don't have a solution. This is just a debate. It's so hard to grab because the second level, that's the general trusting BBC institutes, higher level stuff. Obviously they get it wrong sometimes and so forth. They're all under pressure with money. They have to post stuff quicker than the other agencies and so forth. But the second one is trusting your friends. I mean, if something comes up on your Facebook stream, again, I'm just using Facebook as a prominent example, just because your friend has posted that, or a friend has liked a certain piece of content, it doesn't actually mean it's accurate or true or can be trusted. That's the other thing, and a lot of people use that as a proximity to it. So for some reason in the public debate, a like or a share by a friend or a comment by a friend or even a rating, you know, those 5-star ratings on hotels and stuff, are seen as trust, as a vehicle of trust. It has nothing to do with trust. If I like something, my motivation and intention could be just because it's a buddy's content, or I want to promote his business, or I like the hotel because my uncle is running the hotel. It doesn't mean, trust has nothing to do with the like button. And people do, or people, including me, I'm not saying people in general, do like to confuse it with it. And the reason why it has nothing to do with trust is because there's no risk. Nobody gets prosecuted. If I like something out of ulterior motives, which are maybe harmful, I don't get prosecuted if the like is on fake news. So I have no risk, so I can just do what I want, which is also part of the problem. And it's actually interesting how these things. And the last one is, do you trust yourself? And that's the really hard one to crack, and the one we don't want to address, even in education. I would say, like where I am in education, it's hard to point the finger on oneself. It's so easy to say, the regulators, the government, the whatever, and them. It's not that easy. It's more complex. It involves us. We're like having a bit of wine and watching TV and flashing through Facebook. And we're just starting to consume this and not criticizing it or reflecting it. And it's just, I mean, it's just part of being a human, obviously. I'm not judging. I'm just saying it's important to be aware of these things. So the obvious solution is not to switch off social media. I don't know how to go off ghost or offline or something, because that creates other problems. Because if you're like totally off social media, you can also be excluded of some social elements or even services within societies. I mean, that's another problem. If you don't have a LinkedIn profile, it's very hard to get a job. People want to see a LinkedIn profile. You just take that for granted. So that motivated this Bigfoot campaign. So what we basically, I just flashed through this. The argument for the Bigfoot campaign, Bigfoot being like a mythological creature and you don't know it, being your digital footprint is a mythological creature. You don't really know it because you're giving away all this information in different contexts and different websites, and you don't know what's going to happen with it, and who's going to use it, and how it's going to use it. So we kind of came up with this assumption that that we actually that what we think we are doing online, or what we are represented as online, is significantly different than what we're actually doing. So I'm not saying a misrepresentation, I'm actually saying what we think we are doing, so when we're behaving, is different than what we are actually behaving. So that we're a bit like, yeah, a bit drunk in that sense. You know? We're like saying, oh no, I only use Facebook once a week. But then when we tap into your back end, which we can't do anymore, you're actually on it like 2 hours a day. So why do you think you're only on it twice a week? You know, that perception, that's what we want to try to get at as like a starting point. And there's two types of footprints we kind of came up with. One is the explicit footprint. That's the stuff that you can find. Who Googled, did you ever Google your name?
Yeah.
Everybody. How often do you do that?
Not in the last hour.
Now, obviously it's personalized, so if you're in different parts of the country, different parts of Europe, it'll give you a little bit different results. But that's the explicit, that's the stuff that people can see, that's the stuff that people can find. Obviously it's governed now also with the right to be forgotten, which you hear about a lot, where you can actually take things down. But it's not the source that goes down, it's just Google's link that goes down. You have to go after the sources if you want to do so. But that's the stuff that you can see and what you think you can control in some way. Then there's the implicit footprint, the stuff that you don't know where it is. So where do, like if you go to a website, the amount of time you spend on a website, the amount of websites you go to, the time you spend on certain profiles, the clicks, that trail, that implicit trail. That's a bit harder to grab in that sense. So what we get is, and I don't want to bombard you with all these words, I'll just pick out what is important. We get this feeling that we lose control. It's overwhelming, it's complex, we lose control and this information is out there. But we even lose control with the explicit stuff, with the likes and with the comments, because that's something you can see, but we actually forgot what we liked yesterday or what we liked a week ago. But all that feeds into these profiles. So this is this explicit and implicit footprint. And our assumption was, explicit again is the stuff you can find, the stuff you can see. Implicit is what's used for the filtering algorithm, the trackers, the cookies, all this stuff that's invisible and used a lot as well. And you would think, okay, the awareness, there's a very high awareness or understanding of the explicit footprint and very low on the implicit. But it's actually low on both. So it also, which is also part of this problem, just motivating problems all the time, is that we forget what we liked or what we did a week ago because we were in a different mindset. And again, that feeds the recommendation that again feeds the systems and our footprints. So the assumption here was, how can we have a meaningful debate about data privacy and data security if we're not fully aware of what we're actually doing? You know, so it's like we have to take like 3 steps back almost. We're trying to fix a problem that we don't even understand because we don't even understand what we're doing. So it becomes a bit, it's the lovely word in research, it's a socio-technical problem. So you can't just patch it. You can't just go to all these companies and say, okay, fix it or patch it. It's not a software update. It's a bit more complex than that. So you get this thing. Yes, you get this, which is like, it's just like, we get into this staged experience, you know? and it's just very perception and what we're actually doing is different. So unfortunately, plan was today that you look at the app, you install it, you click around and so forth. It doesn't work because we've been shut out, which is okay, which is understandable. But what we did basically is we asked 10 questions, 10 explicit questions. How often do you like